So, good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kimberly Mayfield, Dean of the School of Education at Holy Names University. We are absolutely delighted to co-sponsor this education forum to hear from candidates running for Assembly District 18. We have just come through a moral and political crisis around racism and the government's role in maintaining this system. We are looking for a new approach, and this is the lens that we will be using today for this education forum. The School of Education at Holy Names University has focused on societal factors that impact the quality of education in society, and especially in urban districts, for over 30 years. While student achievement and well-being are typically thought to be primarily determined by in-school factors and family background, we have consistently challenged the narrowness of this thinking while expertly training teachers to be effective in their school settings, in their local communities. The School of Education embraces the idea that in order to have truly effective urban schools, we must have teachers who come from the community, who understand the community and understand the backgrounds of the students and issues that affect their daily lives. Many of the faculty in the School of Education are active in the community and in various community organizations. In fact, 3 members of the School of Ed are participating today: Kelly Epstein, Nirali Jani, and yours truly. The majority of our credential candidates and undergrads at Holy Names come from Oakland and the East Bay. Many of the communities in this area have been adversely impacted by all of the issues that contribute to educational disequity. These include having access to education, an experience that leads to livable wages, addressing the ongoing need for affordable housing, and the threat of displacement and economic development. Research consistently shows us that creating effective urban schools and urban school districts requires interventions in economic development, housing, health, public safety, sustainability and energy, workforce development, job training, and community development. The questions you will be asked today come out of this reality and will focus on the following areas: housing and jobs, impact of school closures, state takeovers, reparations, public safety, reimagining public safety, and retaining teachers of color. And now I'm happy to pass it over to Paul Cobb from the Oakland Post and the Post Salon.
I better unmute myself here.
Yes.
I want to thank Kimberly Mayfield on behalf of Ken Epstein, our editor, for her wonderful opening and presentation. We're happy to host and co-host, I should say, another one of these salons that invite the candidates to respond to the issues that were just enumerated by Kimberly Mayfield. My wife, Gay Player Cobb, and I also count ourselves alongside the educationally concerned advocates. I'm a former school board member in Oakland, and she's a former 4-time elected county board of education member. And she has joined with these various concerns of education, affordable housing, jobs and workforce development, and the state takeover as issues of concern. So we look forward to inviting each of you, those who are candidates, to respond to these issues and to give your points of view as to how your candidacy will affect the issues in Oakland and the surrounding community. Thank you very much for participating. today.
Thank you so much, Paul. So a little bit of housekeeping. Each candidate will be asked to respond to all of the questions. The first two questions, you'll have 3 minutes, and you see there's a countdown timer on the screen. And then the last 3 questions, you'll have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. And we ask that in your response to the first question, you take a minute to introduce yourselves and say whatever you'd like to share with our audience about yourself and your candidacy. So without further ado, the first question is going to be asked by Kitty Kelly Epstein.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to see you here for discussing these important issues. So the first question is a little long in asking because it sets the framework for what we're trying to get at in relation to what's happening at the Port of Oakland. Members of the State Assembly who were elected by Oaklanders introduced and passed 3 bills designed to facilitate the billionaire John Fisher in obtaining public port property for building luxury residences, a mall, and a stadium. And now someone has placed $200 million in the governor's budget to provide our tax dollars to infrastructure for this project. The bills that were introduced and passed allowed Fisher to get around environmental regulations and to tax Oaklanders without a vote of the people to be taxed. So port businesses have already indicated that they will take their business away from Oakland and to other West Coast ports if they have to deal with the impact of mixing residences with industrial uses. In your role as an assembly person, will you resist this practice of facilitating billionaire Fisher's real estate project and emphasize protecting the Oakland port and the longshore workers who have the best paid jobs of any Black workers in the area? Or will you continue measures that provide public financing to a billionaire's real estate project, which jeopardizes the port?
Thank you, Kitty. James, we'll go to you first.
Sure. Hi. First, thank you for inviting us all to this forum. Beautiful space. My name is James Aguilar. I'm a trustee for San Leandro Unified School District. I was raised in Oakland. I was just walk away to Glenview Elementary School and a bus ride at Edna Brewer Middle School. And I lived there for 14 years. I was raised by my union parents. So I got a little bit of I got a lot of lessons on what it meant to be in a union family and what it meant to organize and what it meant to fight for your community all through my childhood. And so I'm here now. I arrived in San Leandro to begin a career in education, and I started as a student board member over in San Lorenzo. And then I was elected to the San Leandro School Board at just 18 years old. But nonetheless, through all of this, through running for assembly, I'm empowered by my experiences. And one of those experiences even is having the benefit of growing up through the development of what you're talking about with the Howard Terminal project and through all of the situation with the Port of Oakland. I am highly opposed to building any luxury condos, any luxury housing over in the area at the cost of Oakland taxpayers. I mean, we're talking about the possible displacement of minority women-owned small business. We're talking about the displacement of Oaklanders into environmentally unfriendly areas of Oakland. So as an assembly member, and part of the problem too is our legislators are beholden to the interest of corporations and to billionaires, and that has got to stop. I'm a corporate-free candidate, and I'll be coming in the assembly with none of that. And that perspective will be of a very big asset to the assembly. I think that what we need to do in the assembly is oppose this. We need to absolutely be vocal and say the taxpayers of Oakland do not deserve displacement. Taxpayers of Oakland do not deserve to be put through this. I mean, it's a corporate money grab. That's what the whole Port of Oakland situation is. So I will be a vocal advocate for the Oakland community, knowing the conversations that I've heard over the course of the last 15 or so years and how things have developed. So I'm really appreciative of this space, and I look forward to the rest of what we've got today. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next, we'll hear from Victor.
Thank you for bringing this up. You know, this poses a pretty big, ordeal with, what is happening. You know, I think AB 1191 was passed to allow private developer as well as SB, 293 to put forth the, to have a private developer put forth the funding. And at what cost? At what expense? At the expense of the taxpayers, at the expense of our working class, at the expense of our longshoremen. Like you mentioned, these are great, great paying jobs for our African American community that live in the surrounding areas. And this is something that I highly do not support because it would cause displacement. The city of Oakland would have to put forth over $500 million in infrastructure. And that's going to, put so much output with regards to our carbon footprint. And this is just this whole ordeal is just riddled with holes. And I don't understand, why this passed. I mean, this is just all for special interest. It's not about, caring for the Oakland. It's about the Oakland A's and trying to keep them here. And I think, what we need to do is work with the Fisher family to make sure that we keep the A's in East Oakland where they're currently at. This is, this project, although it looks good on paper, it is horrible for the community. And this is why, over 195 folks were up in arms at the Planning Commission meeting to talk about how horrible this project is. It seems clear that, the Fishers are trying to push this through what works for them and not for the community. And we have to put our community first. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Next, we'll hear from Mia.
Hi, thank you all for putting this space together and with the focus particularly on education and what our educational system needs to look like in Oakland. I'm Mia Bonta. I'm running for California State Assembly. I start my story in New York City, where I was raised by activists who were proud members of the Young Lords Party and fought in the early 60s and late 60s for the same kinds of things that we're fighting for today, making sure that we're ensuring police accountability, making sure that we have educational and economic equity, and fighting for childcare, housing rights, and housing justice. My parents taught me how to be an advocate through service, and that's what I've been doing for the last 25 years and for the entirety of my career, but last 25 years here in the East Bay. I'm proud to be a school board member. I've served as a Alameda Unified School Board president, where we've had to wrestle with the impacts of COVID. And I'm proud to be a part of the Oakland Promise, which has ensured that we've had a pathway to opportunity and post-secondary success for children in Oakland through provision of scholarships and opportunity and connection. This race is incredibly important. We've all come through a lot through COVID, and I think most laid to bear are the structural inequities that have already existed for far too long. And I'm seeking to be able to make sure that in the Assembly, we attend to an equitable economic recovery and health recovery through COVID, that we're focusing on reopening our schools in a way that ensures that our children continue to be protected and have the ability to make up for this this last 2 years of disenfranchisement and disengagement, and that our educators are preserved in the process to ensure that we have the kinds of teachers that Ms. Mayfield addressed in the opening remarks about what Holy Names has done. We need to be able to ensure that we stop displacing our community members, and we need to ensure that we have our Black community centered in this moment, particularly in Oakland. On the question around the port of Oakland, I think we need to also look back at the traditional and longstanding divestment and underinvestment in East Oakland as the starting point of what we need to focus on. It goes beyond just the ballpark in existence and really needs to make sure that we're offering reparations to East Oakland in terms of the infrastructure that we're building there. I believe that there's a way for us to be able to hold the hold the Oakland A's accountable to the plan and the process that they made and put forward in terms of a review of the Howard Terminal project. And I think that starts with ensuring that we're looking deeply at the kind of stakeholder engagement around the CEQA process, so that we actually have all of the data and information we need to be able to ensure that project gets reviewed and that any kind of implementation is done responsibly.
Thank you. Joel?
Hello, good
Hello.
afternoon. I'm glad to be joining this discussion and congratulate the hosts for bringing us all together. My name is Joel Britton. I was born and raised in North Dakota, actually, but I've been living in the Bay Area for 15 years. And I'd like to just point out that I began as a political activist and a militant of the Socialist Workers' Party many years ago under the influence of the struggle against Jim Crow segregation, which I was part of that struggle to overthrow that brutal system. The closest this country has been to fascism is the Jim Crow segregation. The Cuban Revolution in the early years carried out an incredible educational campaign to eliminate illiteracy, mobilizing 100,000 young people to go to the countryside and all the small towns and teach people how to read and write. That and the exemplary defense of this workers' revolution in the early years, at the Bay of Pigs, for example, defending against a US-backed invasion, had a big impact on me, and again was part of determining who I am and who I became and who I am. I am not for spending one penny of public money and resources to subsidize not just this scheme of this particular billionaire, but of any professional sports. Take a look at the exemplary role that Cuba plays in developing baseball players, among other athletes. We don't need professional sports. We need amateur sports for everybody, starting at a young age. You know, all of the schools, and without the financial burden that's put on working class families now. If their sons and daughters want to be part of athletic teams, the huge cost that this involves is outrageous.
Thank you, Joel. Next, we'll hear from Janani.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Janani Ramachandran. I'm a social justice attorney and activist, a former City of Oakland Public Ethics Commissioner, and a proud resident of Oakland's beautiful District 2. And I'm running for assembly because the voices of so many of our community members, especially in Oakland, are being left out of the political process and shut out of Sacramento. And I'm running because we need an advocate who's going to restore Oakland's local control over our education and our economies. And with regard to Howard Terminal, I was the first candidate in this race who took an uncompromising, clear, and public stance against the project, because having visited Howard Terminal, I have seen why it is entirely unfeasible and harmful to our West Oakland residents and extremely harmful to our thriving port, the 5th largest in the country. I'm proud to have spoken at Planning Commission meetings, be a member of the Oakland, the Coliseum Task task force and stand alongside the longshoremen of ILWU, Oakland East Bay Democratic Club, and Oakland Tenants Union, all of whom who have endorsed me in this race. I'm proud to have stand by them in their solidarity with West Oakland residents and port workers who all oppose this project. And I oppose this project and will continue to do so as a legislator because billionaire interest does not equal economic development and certainly does not equal community development. There are 85,000 well-paid unionized jobs at stake, primarily longshoremen of the ILWU, which was one of the first racially integrated unions in the nation. If we have maritime threatened, the ability for our shelves to be stocked at the price that they are is threatened. And the A's say that they're going to replace these well-paying jobs with seasonal concession stand jobs and office jobs that most likely won't actually go to Oakland residents. That's not the same as the jobs held by members of the ILWU right now. And economic development is crucial. Coming out of this pandemic, we need to allow our port to thrive, not be harmed. And again, having visited, I've seen that the Howard Terminal is not just an idling empty parking lot. It is a crucial buffer zone between industry and commercial and residential activity. There is a critical turning basin for ships. And without that opportunity, with knowing that traffic and congestion and pedestrian safety is all going to be at risk if this project goes through, will certainly encourage businesses to leave. Not to mention environmental impacts. This project would increase emissions by over 45%, even after taking mitigation into consideration, in an EJ community where there are already 5 times the amount of toxins in the rest of the Bay Area. And finally, gentrification is going to undoubtedly be a problem. There are 3,000 condos that are being proposed, none of which are affordable, not to mention the over $1 billion of taxpayer money that will be at stake.
Thank you. Malia?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Malia Vella. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Alameda, a workers' rights attorney with the Teamsters Union, and a professor at Mills College in Oakland. Thank you for putting on this forum today. My mother is actually a graduate of Holy Names College, previous to it becoming a university, and was an educator in the city of Oakland. She was the first in her family to go to college, the first in her family to graduate from college. And it's precisely the type of educational opportunity and the fact that that Holy Names invested in women of color at a time when those scholarships were typically not available, that allowed my mother to have that opportunity. So, you know, it's an honor to be here today. I think in many ways, this conversation that we're having around creating opportunities means that we need to have community input. The best projects are a result of a robust process that involves community stakeholders, diverse viewpoints, and an opportunity to meaningfully engage in dialogue to get the best community benefits. I do support seeing the implementation of infrastructure and funding to allow for zero emission infrastructure that has been in the pipeline for over 10 years, regardless of the Howard Terminal project. I would like to see an investment in separating out and creating and investing in multi-transit opportunities, zero emission vehicle opportunities for West Oakland. This infrastructure needs to happen regardless of the Howard Terminal plan. So I do support the funding. I don't necessarily support tying it to the Howard Terminal project. I also think there is a great need for housing. And I know that developers love to make proposals for 100% luxury condos. We see that all the time at the local level. What allows us to push back on that is a robust process that allows for community input and comment. In the city of Alameda, and while I've been on council, I've always pushed back to make sure that we have inclusionary housing, including 20 to 25% affordable and low income and very low income housing. So we need to see that in any project that comes through, as well as 100% electrification and making sure that we're meeting our climate goals and making sure that we have opportunities for communities to have a right of return, and a right to remain. So all of these things need to happen. I was disappointed to see the CEQA process being cut down and the request for an extension of time for input cut short, especially when we were dealing with a draft EIR that was 600 pages.
Thank you. The next question will be posed by Nirali Jani.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a crucial question for many of us in this forum, so we'd like to give you 3 minutes to answer. All of you have said at previous forums that you will support loan forgiveness for Oakland Unified School District. When Representative Swanson was elected to the State Assembly, his first act was to introduce legislation that would return Oakland to local control. So the question is, will you immediately introduce legislation to complete the return of local control through loan forgiveness, through the removal of the state trustee from Oakland, and through dismantling the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, also called FICMAT, not just in our district, but statewide, where it has been ineffective and even harmful across the K through 16 system? And if so, what is your timeline for doing so?
Okay, we will go to Malia first.
OUSD has been drowning in debt, and we've been seeing millions of dollars being taken from the city budget, or from the school district budget every year in order to pay off the interest. And we're still years away from seeing the full amount of the debt paid off. The state of California has worked with other school districts in the past to to look at the financing for these loans. It's an issue that I'm very familiar with from my work with representing classified employees at West Contra Costa Unified. Both of these school districts have a large student population that represents and is reflective of the BIPOC community. And the fact that our state has refused to move and restructure this debt and forgive this debt has meant that these school districts continue to face an economic situation that is just untenable. So I absolutely do plan on moving on this, but I also think that it can't just be for OUSD. We have to take into account our neighboring school districts that also see the same sort of oppressive financing and untenable situations in the area, and make sure that we're addressing it in a way that we have a state surplus right now. It's a little infuriating to me that the state is not addressing the debt of these school districts, especially when we're saying that we want to reinvest in and invest in communities of color. I don't know how you can talk about reparations. I know that the state of California has a committee meeting on making reparations to students. We can't even begin to have that conversation if we're going to continually create these untenable situations that disparately impact our communities of color by allowing for this debt to continue and to take away funding, per pupil funding from our students every single school year. And it's going to, the reason being is we keep seeing school closures and our neighborhood schools keep getting impacted. We also see that we're basically being hit really hard for a loan that the taxpayers in this district did not have a right and ability to weigh in on at an interest rate that is, just way too high. So I think that we have to do this. I think this is connected to the conversation around reparations. I think this is connected to the conversation around charter schools. I think this is connected to the conversation about how we address the school to prison pipeline and so many other things in addressing the achievement gap. So we need to do this. It's the right thing to do. And I think it's not just for OUSD, but it's for all of our school districts that have been equally impacted.
Thank you. Janani?
Short answer is absolutely yes. I would immediately introduce legislation to forgive OUSD's loan and implement local control and remove the jurisdiction of the state trustee. Zooming out for a second, the state's decision to take over OUSD, mismanage funds, and frankly, blatant racism in the decision to take over OUSD in the first place, ran up our city's debt farther than it ever needed to be, from about 35 million to the over 100 million that's owed today. And this has led to the proliferation of charter schools, which makes us the district with the highest percentage of charter schools in the state, almost 30%. This has led to the number of school closures, particularly for Black majority schools. And this has led to the increased divides between schools in the flatlands and below 580 versus those on the hills, in a city where over 80% of students are on free or reduced lunches. So I would do absolutely everything to reinstate local control and would implement legislation to forgive OUSD's loan. But I also recognize that in reality, this is going to be extremely difficult. And we have been asking for loan forgiveness since the early 2000s. And since a portion of this loan has already been sold to Goldman Sachs, it's going to be very difficult for an automatic immediate forgiveness. So I would also, in addition to trying to forgive the loan, work with existing Oakland school board members to accelerate payment of the loans as well. Because given the amount of funding through COVID-related relief from both federal and state pools, OUSD does have the ability to pay the amount. We just need to accelerate that timeline so that we can pay it off and regain full local control. Another thing to supplement this work that I want to do is look at the fine print of some of our existing legislation and root out anything that hinders Oakland's local control. So for example, this year, there is a trailer bill this year in the budget where the governor has language that specifically says that every charter school will get a full 2 extra years before renewal. And that's going to be the importance of having a true Oakland, a true ally for Oakland education in this seat, to make sure we don't have those hidden language in many of our broader education bills or budgetary proposals, because charter schools are not true public schools, and we need to be able to do everything to grow Oakland public schools with full local control as soon as possible.
Thank you. Joel.
Thank you. Well, I think it's necessary to step back from this immediate issue. Whatever's done along the lines of what others have been raising is not going to solve the crisis of education. My view is that the purpose of education in this society is not really to educate. It's to give the educated, so-called, a stake in thinking they are going to be different, better off, more white collar than people who work all their lives. Those who manage to get a college degree are counted on to be more dependable supporters of the status quo. So the status quo is, millions and millions, tens of millions of us, our labor is exploited. I neglected to mention earlier that I'm a longtime trade unionist. I was a member of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union for over a decade at oil refineries in Southern California. I've been a member of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, including in a slaughterhouse and other unions. But ending the exploitation of labor, racist oppression, second-class status of women, these are what we need to look toward, because if we don't do that, we're just little reforms are going to leave exploitation, racial oppression, and second-class status of women in place. So education reform under capitalism, I would argue, is a fraud. And what's needed is revolutionary change. As long as the wealthy capitalist class rules this country, which they do through both the Democratic and Republican Party administrations on the national and local level, most working class children will get mind-deadening training, not real education. the deference and obedience the rulers seek to inculcate in the classroom are backed up on the street by cops, clubs, and automatic weapons. So this is the view of my party, the Socialist Workers' Party. We're for transforming it, learning into a universal and lifetime activity. But this revolutionary change will only come about when working people succeed in organizing the kind of movement that can succeed in bringing working people to power in this country.
Thank you. Next we'll have Mia.
Thanks so much. I think it's important to kind of step back and look at really what the root cause of our current situation is in Oakland Unified School District. One is definitely the state receivership and the which is at this point decades old, and the resulting FCMAC order that has created a status of fiscal enslavement for Oakland Unified School District. That paired with the overproliferation of charters over the last 2 decades has created a situation where we have a structural deficit that Oakland Unified School District cannot get out from under. And at this point, going through a process of ensuring that the school district goes back to repay the state for the fiscal mismanagement that created the problem in the first place, I'm challenged by that approach. I think that we need to have a full ability to be able to do a full loan forgiveness for the debt that is owed to the state, that the state actually created in the first place. And it would absolutely be one of my very first priorities to ensure that we put together a plan to be able to ensure that the state has the ability to do that. I think we need to do that with bringing in the experts in who have been living this for the last several decades in Oakland Unified and throughout the city to put together a plan that would actually ensure that we have the ability to do so. I would want to prioritize specifically Oakland Unified in that package of seeking out debt relief, full debt relief because the ways in which other school districts came to their FCMAT status is vastly different from what happened in Oakland Unified with the two issues creating the structural deficit, one around over-proliferation of charters, and the second one around the mismanagement of state resources to begin with. I think it's absolutely critical that we look at both of those things independently. On the school closure front, it has created a situation of needing to be able to close schools. And the reality is that it's only allowed us to be able to close district schools, which creates vast inequities for our students and doesn't allow us to be able to focus on key legislation at the local level, like reparations for Black students. So we need to be able to go after and actually take advantage of AB 1505, which allows school districts the ability to consider fiscal impact in the authorizing and reauthorization of charter schools, which is something that we need to focus on. And we need to ensure that we're absolutely taking as a first step for the city of Oakland and for Oakland Unified School District, removing the FCMAT order, getting the state out of local control business, and creating a situation where we actually have the ability to implement change for Black students in particular in the city.
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you. I think, what needs to happen is, we need to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable. We need to make sure that we get rid of this debt. As a former school board trustee, there's clearly something that we need to do, and that's make sure we need to close the equity gap, and that's something that didn't happen here. The Oakland Unified School District has been in receivership, which it's lost complete local control. It's been facing a structural deficit. We've seen $17 million cut from the Oakland Unified School District budget, and we've seen 600 jobs, union jobs, cut. As somebody who was raised in a union household, who supports the unions, this is something that is, financially disruptive to the communities, to the working class families, and we need to make sure that we get rid of this debt, eliminate that, and that we have local control back in Oakland Unified School District. You know, as somebody who, you know, I understand the vital role that the schools play in our communities, and it's not a secret that public schools are struggling, and these issues have been exacerbated by COVID-19. You know, I believe that the teachers deserve a living wage, and all children deserve access to quality, engaging, and culturally competent education. And we need to make sure that we, you know, the charter schools plague the system. Here in San Leandro, we don't have any charter schools, and that takes away from funding that could be going back into the community. And this is something that we need to focus on. We need to make sure that we also have, you know, our children have access to free preschool and universal childcare. We need to make sure that we're preventing the school closures by increasing funding for our K to 12 public school system. And you know, Prop 15 was something that almost passed, and this is something that we need to focus on. It lost by a narrow margin, and this is billions and billions of dollars that can be reinvested back into our educational system. Something that I've done here locally, you know, we work with our community to help close the equity gap. We paid for our kids to take the AP exams here in San Leandro, SATs, ACTs. And what that resulted is our children of color getting 4s and 5s on the AP exams. They didn't have to worry about paying for a test, and that increases their viability to get into college. And we were able to get AP College District of the Year out of 14,000 school districts in the US and Canada. San Leandro came out on top. So this is something that I would do to make sure that we get rid of the loan and that we focus on our education and put our children first.
Thank you, Victor. James?
Yeah, so I have the interesting benefit of having been in OUSD a little under 6 years ago. You know, I'm only 21. I remember middle school, I remember elementary school, and I also remember being that young, engaged kid. And I saw what happened. I saw the impact of OUSD under state receivership for so many years. Part of the problem is with Oakland is we're looking at the impact of really crap educational reform from the 70s and 80s, including Prop 13 and the complete mess that California created for OUSD and so many different school districts across the state of California. Millions and millions of dollars that could instead be going to student achievement and bridging the gap with educational equity is instead going toward paying off these loans, and that should not be the case. I'm in full support of getting in the assembly and making sure that we completely forgive Oakland Unified's loan. Loan forgiveness is on my top priorities when it comes to education. I think too that we need to get the FCMAT order out of there so that we can bring local control back to Oakland Unified, and so we could start having these conversations, and then also provide the foundation for what we can do for reparations for Black students, and make sure that we're providing the resources necessary for our students and our staff to achieve and to do better. It's emotional for me because I was raised in Oakland Unified, and I want to do the best I can to be a vocal advocate for Oakland. I think too that in this equation, part of that problem, as I was talking about before with Prop 13 and educational reform, we need full and fair funding for California's public schools because the state of California hasn't stepped up for so many years, for many decades, and it's time that we do that. And you know, it's going to be hard, but it's going to take a coalition. We need to bridge, we need to bring together not only our community, we need to bring together the students, we need to bring together our union partners and have this conversation at the state level. It's gonna be a battle. You know, education politics in and of its own is a massive bundle of craziness, and we need to navigate that carefully and make sure that we are hitting our goals in making sure that we have loan forgiveness for Oakland Unified and many different school districts that are experiencing similar issues, bringing back local control and fighting for full and fair funding of California's public K-12 schools.
Thank you. So I have the next question, and many of you have mentioned it in your previous answers. So this question is about reparations. So of course, it's a big issue nationally and internationally, and it's clearly a major issue in Oakland. We expect that our assembly member would hit the ground running on this issue. So we'd like to hear what you've done to prepare, what you're doing, and how you will make reparations a reality. And for example, when thinking about the Oakland schools, we know that the reparations proposal was blocked by the state trustee because it attempted to stop school closures, particularly at those schools with 30% or more African American students. This is one of the many concrete ways in which the state intervenes to stifle the education of Black students. So what are you going to do to make reparations for the many years of harming Oakland, African American students in Oakland, a reality? And we will start with Mia, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Absolutely, we need to be able to ensure that we are focusing reparations for Black students as a central thing, and that would be in addition to focusing on OUSD's fiscal enslavement. One thing that I want to be able to take on for this district, because it's so critical. Some of the things that I've already done to be able to support that related to my prior answer was being a part of the workshop that created the existence of being able to consider fiscal impact for the closure of or non-reauthorization of charter schools. I was proud to be able to do that work. I also have been focused on making sure that we in Alameda Unified and in Oakland for that matter are building out a deep bench of mental health supports for our students right now as they don't feel safe, don't feel like they have the resources that they need to be able to succeed and have not been provided for. I think one other area is definitely working with OEA, our teachers union in Oakland, to ensure that we are taking on issues and looking at the way in which we are focusing special education supports or not in the school district as a part of our reparations. We know that there's an overrepresentation clearly of African American and Black students within the special education, and that comes from over-identification, a lack of being able to have teachers in their lives who come from a diverse background, and that has been something that I've been proud to be able to support within the city of Alameda as a school board president as well. And finally, I've also been focused on ensuring that the pipeline for children is strong as we deal with the fact that so many of our Black students in particular are not at the literacy level that we need to be able to ensure that they have access to. And that is something that I have worked my entire life on in terms of early childhood education, early education supports, and will continue to be able to do that at the California State Legislature.
Thank you. Joel?
I believe that working people with African-American workers in the vanguard, because of the whole history of this country and the fact that this oppressed nationality, which is big majority working class in composition, will be in the vanguard of this struggle. We'll fight for a workers and farmers government that will take many measures that will make up for past discrimination and oppression. Right now, because of the massive unemployment, millions of people out of work, with workers who are Black having been hit harder, special emergency steps are required. That's why I've been campaigning for a federal government finance public works program to put millions to work at union scale wages, building housing that workers can afford to be in, childcare centers to help the tremendous numbers of women who've been forced to be at home or leave their jobs, schools, hospitals, much more. Cutting the work week with no cut in pay when unemployment goes up. That's across the board. For cost of living clauses in every contract and retirement benefits to offset rises in prices. These kind of measures will especially help those, including African Americans, who've been discriminated against and especially oppressed.
Thank you. Janani?
Yeah, in order to get to true equity, we need proactive opportunities for those who have been most marginalized in our incredibly racially unjust systems. And without those proactive measures that include reparation, Oakland will continue to lose its Black population. Oakland has lost about 25% of its Black population in the past 2 decades. And this is very relevant to education because the population of Black students is roughly proportional to Black teachers, and without opportunities to be able to afford to stay in Oakland, without opportunities to be able to afford housing and access to resources, we're going to continue to see this number decline. Specific to reparations, I wholeheartedly and publicly supported the resolution for Black students passed by Oakland School Board. And I certainly hope that it is only a starting point to get to where we need to be to make reparations a reality, to make both reparations and stopping school closures in Black majority schools a reality. I also supported the Black Organizing Project's resolution that eliminated police from schools with the goal to disband all OUSD police in the next 20 years. And at the state level, I supported AB 3121. I drafted a letter of support on behalf of my organization, and I built a coalition of domestic violence organizations throughout the state to stand up and support this bill as well. And AB 3121 is certainly also just one step. This bill would propose a study, and we need to make sure we have the funding to make sure we actually see it through, which I would propose to do by enacting a wealth tax on all individuals with over $50 million of assets to fund this.
Thank you. Malia?
All of the data has shown that we have been disproportionately failing our Black students. OUSD was not the first school district to propose what it did. West Contra Costa actually passed a similar resolution a year prior to allocate millions of dollars towards Black student achievement, making sure that we were being proactive about hiring and retaining Black educators. Making sure that we set aside additional funds for mental health services and tutoring and educational achievement services for Black students. And this is all backed by data that we have been tracking for years. This is also similar for OUSD as it is for many other districts. I also think that as part of the Black New Deal, and what we really need to focus on is making sure that our cities and our counties and other municipalities are taking a shared interest in and actually picking up costs for some of these services. It's why, as a council member, I supported the allocation of city funds to pay for an expansion of mental health services for our students. There are shared constituents. We need to stop bifurcating things and saying it's a student-related cost, therefore it goes to the school district. I think that the way that we're going to address reparations and making sure that we're addressing all of the needs of our students is by proactively funding what we know works. The state needs to help all school districts, including OUSD, meet the requirements for the IEP program so that our students are not disproportionately impacted, and make sure that we're actually funding special education the way that we should. Making sure that we are funding mental health services because we know the need has expanded, and making sure that we are repealing things like Prop 209 so that we can actually focus on the racial disparities that we know exist.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the conversation on reparations for Black students should not be a one-time conversation. It has to be a conversation on what we're going to do for decades on hand and keep this conversation going, because I think a lot of legislators are going to use this as a talking piece when, we have got a serious conversation and issue to deal with. And so that's going to take bringing in restorative justice practices in OUSD and across the state of California, making sure that we have solid implementation of that, making sure that we provide mental health services fully funded by the state of California, where California already lacks, As I was saying before, you know, with coalition building, we need to build a really big coalition from the ground up, grassroots, from not only with members of OUSD, our fabulous teachers, our amazing staff, but also our students and our school board members who are not beholden to charter interests. I think too that in this conversation, we really need to bring community-based organizations into the fold where they take up a lot of the services that OUSD lacks in. Same for a lot of our school districts in California, really uplifting the community-based services to come in and also be a part of this conversation. When it comes to funding, obviously all of this comes with a price tag, but California needs to put its money where its mouth is and start to reprioritize its general fund. I mean, we spend more on incarcerating people of color than anywhere in the world. And that needs to change. And we need to actually have the conversation on reallocating dollars through our budget to make sure that we're actually footing the bill for this conversation and we're actually putting our work on the ground.
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you. In the U.S. in 1988, we paid reparations to the survivors of the Japanese who were in the internment camps during World War II, and they were given $20,000 a piece. I think, you know, this is something, you know, and the assembly, this is something that is being started by AB 3121, which is a task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. This is something that, you know, we need to focus on in our community here in District 18. California, our economy produces more than $1 trillion, more than the next productive state, yet our supplemental poverty rate is at 23%. These disparities are completely stark, especially right here in the East Bay. A study by the Alameda County Public Health Department that was released right before the 2008 economic collapse reported that an African-American child born in West Oakland can expect to die almost 15 years earlier than a white child born in the Oakland Hills. There is a huge disparity. There's that's something that's starkly wrong with that. If the racial wealth divide is left unaddressed and is not exacerbated further over the next 8 years, median Black household wealth is on a path to hit zero by 2053. Median Latino household wealth is projected to hit zero 20 years later or by 2073. In sharp contrast, median white household wealth would climb to $137,000 by 2053 and $147,000 by 2073. So it's time to renew our social compact. We need to make sure that there are reparations for the lasting harms caused to the African Americans by slavery and its continued effects, as well as people of color harmed by discriminatory policies. And we need to make sure that there are policies that reduce barriers to home ownership and help build generational wealth long denied to Black and Indigenous people of color.
Thank you. The next question is going to be about public safety, and Walter Riley will ask it. Walter, you're muted. There we go.
We all know that public safety has to do with the wellness of our community in general. We've been engaged in a constant struggle for a more humane society. Public safety has to consider the public as a whole: housing, healthcare, education, criminal justice. The police is just one aspect of that. What have you done? Who have you worked with? What are you now doing? And what will you do to move this agenda forward? How will you reallocate resources? And how will you reimagine policing and public safety?
Okay, we will start with Janani.
I want to work towards a world where we have options for someone experiencing a mental health crisis, a survivor of domestic violence, or a victim of crime has options to not only call the police, but to call alternative services for someone that's more suited to their needs. And I've worked on issues I've worked on solutions that work in this regard. I'm a volunteer with APTP's Mental Health First program, where we have community responders on weekend nights responding to calls from individuals or bystanders experiencing mental health crisis. Second, I believe in investing in restorative justice programs. I've worked with Men Creating Peace, which is a domestic violence restorative-based intervention program in this district, and have served on their board, and have frankly seen how absolutely powerful this work is in helping men who have committed harm be able to hold themselves accountable and healing their families and their communities as well. I've also worked with the San Quentin Restorative Justice Project, and have attended their circles for some of their circles for quite a while, and I'm involved and I'm supportive of Communities United with Restorative Justice and Our Joy, and I'm supported by Fania Davis in this race. I also believe that we need to address the root causes of why violence happens in our communities, and that involves educational opportunities, job training opportunities, pathways out of committing harm in the first place, which is why I support technical training in high schools, which is why I support allowing our port and our Oakland port to thrive, and giving people alternative pathways out of crime and out of poverty.
Thank you. Malia?
Been working a lot on this issue as a council member, and I think it's important that as we have these conversations, we center the voices of our community members who have been disproportionately impacted by our current system. But some of the things that we've done that I've been proud to be a part of is demilitarizing our police. I voted to sell the armored vehicle that our previous council voted for. I have supported funding wraparound services and social services out of our city budget for our neighbors and vulnerable community members, investing in transitional housing, including supporting a measure to build a local wellness center that would include everything from wraparound services for our vulnerable and unhoused community members to housing and end-of-life care for our community members in need, defunding our school-based police officers, funding our mental health services for youth, making sure that we are also setting aside over $1 million in funding for alternative responses for calls for service, for non-violent and non-criminal calls for service, to make sure that we are changing how we are responding. Also making sure that we are looking at funding both community-based models as well as working with folks to bring in clinicians to actually provide services when we have people that are in moments of crisis, and understanding how complex those calls for service can be. So I really have been supportive of investing in the services that we know work and shifting funds, and I think we need to do that across the board statewide.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, so I've played an active role in really evaluating what it means to police our schools. And so we've taken a look at previous contracts with SROs, and we've made sure that we are not looking toward traditional policing in schools and moving toward community-based alternatives, and ensuring that we're engaging in community building restorative practices so that we're not detrimentally affecting the education of our students just by militarizing our schools. In addition, as a director of government community relations over in San Francisco State University, as well in combination with a position with the Cal State Student Association, I've been active and vocal when it comes to defunding university police departments and ensuring that that's not only a conversation in San Francisco, but across the entire Cal State system. So instead of, again, with our schools, militarizing our universities, really bringing in home community-based alternatives and give our students a better educational experience just from that perspective. in the legislature, I will be a big advocate for ensuring that we empower community-based alternatives. We empower community organizations to come into the fold and start to clean up the mess that is our law enforcement system in the state of California. I'm tired of seeing my Black brothers and sisters being murdered at the hands of police simply because they come into situations that they have no given right to. Mental health, for example, no police officer should be dealing with a mental health crisis, yet we see issues like with what happened, unfortunately, in the city of San Leandro with Stephen Taylor. Should not have happened, never should happen. And so I will be active in ensuring that we build up mental support services and community-based alternatives.
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you. I think we need to make sure that we're, working with our community, and that's something that, I've done successfully here in San Leandro, and, that I would do in Sacramento. During my time as a council member in San Leandro, I've worked closely with residents to support the creation of a civilian police oversight and other policies that reimagine and prioritize our public safety. Like James had mentioned earlier, that there was a unnecessary killing of Stephen Taylor, and that's something that I work behind with the movements and organizations such as the Black Lives Matter movement that expose disproportionate discrimination. I support reparations from lasting harms caused to African Americans by slavery and its continued effects. That we worked here locally to make sure that we were working with Seed Collaborative to conduct a study to see what is going on and how we can implement our policies and procedures. And I advocated to defund our police here and reimagine what public safety looks like locally, and to make sure that we end qualified immunity, and that we're increasing our transparency and accountability in our police operations. That's things that I've done locally. I think at the state level, we need to make sure that we're eliminating jury selection biases, and that we're lowering the incarceration rate by decriminalizing victimless crimes, ending mandatory minimum sentencing, supporting restorative justice programs, broadening California's mental health diversion programs, and providing more supportive re-entry services. We need to make sure that we know that there are wraparound services for those who are exiting our criminal justice system to help them get ahead and get set up so that they're on a path to success.
Thank you. Mia?
I really appreciate the question and the framing around restructuring public safety to be more holistic in its approach to really considering housing, the connection between housing, healthcare, and education. I've been working for the better part of 25 years to ensure that we disrupt the school to prison pipeline by ensuring that we're doing things like promoting community school opportunities, deep investment in and work over the course of my career in youth development programming, and community-based approaches to ensure that youth have the resources that they need to be able to live freely and safely, and not be criminalized for just being Black and brown on our streets. I've ensured that we have the ability to focus in on community policing programs. It was work that I was proud to do over 20 years ago in a different space, to ensure that when Black and brown people saw police, they could actually be people that could be trusted in their lives. We don't have the kind of trust that we need between our Black community and police in this moment right now. And that's largely because we've allowed for a systemically broken and structurally racist system to impact the way that our youth are able to, and our communities are able to really access public safety. I've focused on being able to promote programs that allow for first response to be out of care instead of out of force, and have focused on making sure that we've taken our police out of our school systems entirely, because they don't belong there. We need to get our police focused on serious violent crimes in Oakland in particular, and out of public spaces where they don't belong, so that we can have our public spaces supported by community ombudsmen, by people who are able to lift lift up and coordinate our services so that we can stop stop a cycle where people aren't getting the safety that they need. Black people in particular aren't getting the safety that they need, but we're also having a high rise in violent crimes in the city of Oakland.
Thank you. Joel?
I don't believe with the ever deepening economic crisis that this capitalist system is in, that there's going to be growing trust between working people and all of the various police agencies. Every time we go on strike, and there's thousands of workers on strike in various parts of the country, or locked out in Texas, Minnesota, Alabama, coal workers, oil refinery workers. In every single case, the police are on hand to help the employer, not to help the striker. Police under capitalism are in business to keep the working class people in line. And whether the funding is decreased or increased, this will continue to be the case, whether they have the armored vehicle in Alameda or not, that this will be the role they will play. And of course, cop brutality and killings fall disproportionately heavily on workers and young people who are Black, Latino, and immigrants. Personally, I was part of the fight to demand the arrest and prosecution, which we need to do in all of these cases where there's cop brutality, of the officers who were responsible for the death of Stephen Taylor in the Hesperian Avenue Walmart store. By the way, I'm on the ballot as retail worker. I work in a different Walmart store, but Stephen was shot to death within 40 seconds of the arrival of the officers. I'm against, well, okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. The last question we have will be asked by Precious James, who is a native Oaklander. She graduated from Oakland Technical High School. She completed her bachelor's degree at the University of California, Riverside. She completed her credential at Holy Names University and her master's degree at Concordia University. She is a teacher at Madison Park Elementary School. She was Teacher of the Year for the Oakland Unified School District from 2000 for the 2019-2020 academic year. And in the fall, she will start impacting the school site in a different way as a teacher on special assignment. So we're glad that you could be with us today, Precious, and you have the next and final question.
Thank you, Dr. Mayfield. The question is quite lengthy. It says, are you aware that there are 4 different costly racially discriminatory standardized assessments involved in becoming a teacher, and that you would have the power to make change in this area? What is your position on high stakes tests as a barrier to entry for teachers of color, and particularly Black teachers? Will you introduce legislation to remove barriers, including excessive testing, to people of color becoming teachers? And will you introduce legislation to pay for the cost of people becoming teachers?
Thank you. Joel, we'll start with you. You're muted.
Okay. I think it's very important. The first thing we need to do is get students back to the classrooms and the teachers as well. There've been a number of situations where now the students are back, but the teachers are still not. They're still functioning via Zoom, which is not good. This can be done safely, and this will be very important for the students themselves and for their families. The situation has had a devastating impact on students and working class families, especially and especially the women who in many cases have had to quit jobs to be at home. I believe pay should be increased. The 3 years ago, the teacher strikes that started in West Virginia were very important in fighting in that state, especially for not only a pay increase, but for teachers, but also for other school employees. Reducing class size, things like that can be looked at. But until we get organized, strengthen our unions, build solidarity with other fighting workers in other parts of the country and the world, from Burma, Ethiopia, India, where the farmers are fighting, and other places, until we build our own party, a labor party, we're not gonna seriously deal with questions like retaining teachers. So I would like to just remind people I'm on the ballot as retail worker, and you can go to themilitant.com to read about my campaign.
Thank you. Janani?
The short answer is yes. I will certainly introduce legislation to removing barriers for our BIPOC communities to becoming teachers, including the cost and discrimination of testing as a barrier entry. It's shameful that we have almost a 20% teacher turnover rate in OUSD, and that includes so many of my own incredibly brilliant, passionate, compassionate BIPOC friends who have been teachers in OUSD that are passionate about their students and the work, that have made extremely difficult choices to leave because of low pay, high stress, large class sizes, and family obligations. When it comes to standardized testing is historically racist and intended to remove people of color from certain professions. In my own background as an attorney and formerly as a law student, I was part of a statewide coalition of BIPOC students to remove the bar exam as a condition for if you went to an accredited school, that you should not have to be required to take the bar exam to enter the profession, because we did research and looked into the historically racist origins of having the bar exam, as well as the extremely discriminatory outcomes and how it truly does not test any ability to be an attorney. And in the same way, I would work on initiatives along with coalitions across the state to remove the barriers of discriminatory testing in the teaching profession as well. I also believe we need to certainly increase teacher pay and focus on state or federal solutions to increase this gap, including by implementing a wealth tax, but also by supporting teachers in other aspects of their life. For example, housing vouchers, $500 a month housing vouchers, so teachers can afford to live where they work and afford to teach. I will stop there.
Thank you. Malia?
Most of the research actually finds that the certification exams are not a strong predictor of teaching effectiveness. They're also not a great measure in terms of potential performance in a program. We really need to, we know that standardized testing has a number of different issues, which is why even for higher education admissions, we're moving away from that model. So the teaching profession also needs to evolve and adapt. And I certainly support looking at that and carrying legislation along that has been crafted with and by our educators who have gone through those processes. In terms of the cost, the cost is, again, just another barrier that we're putting there. We say that we want to attract more educators from the community. We say that we want to attract and retain more educators of color. And by adding costs to the actual credentialing process, we're making it very difficult, if not impossible. So I think if we want to incentivize that, we need to allow for more waivers. Or potentially not even charge for any sort of exams or credentialing that we are doing. But we also need to go beyond that. As a council member, I worked in collaboration with our school district to build workforce housing for our teachers and our school district employees. We need to see more collaborations like that, because it's not just the barriers to entry, it's also the barriers to living in the community in which you work that are preventing many of our BIPOC community members from coming back to serve their communities as educators. So we need to do all three, and I'm willing to be and would continue to be championing these issues.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, it's funny actually. The other day, I'm a junior at SF State, and so I was looking at post-grad options, and one of them was credentialing. And yeah, it's a ridiculous process that anybody would have to go through. I mean, hundreds of dollars of tests. We're talking about the CBEST, the CSET, many different sections of the CSET, and many more. You know, we've got to remove barriers from earning a credential. As I think with all education, I think credentialing should be free of cost. Of course, you know, making tuition-free colleges and universities is going to be that step to make that happen. I think too that in the conversation of after credentialing, making sure that we're retaining quality teachers, we're retaining faculty in higher education, we need recurring dollars. That's the main point I'm going to bring home. We need recurring dollars to recruit, hire, and retain faculty at our universities and in K through 12 to make sure that we're keeping the quality educators that are being brought up through our system. I too also believe that we need transit-oriented housing specifically for teachers, so that we can get them housed, you know, where they're working. That's going to be extremely important. That's another barrier, another costly barrier that's added for our educators that shouldn't be there. You know, it's going to take a lot of work, and I can't believe that it's a battle in the legislature, but we're going to have that battle, and we're going to have these conversations and make sure that we get the funding necessary to make free credentialing happen, to take away examinations for credentialing that don't even determine what it means to be an effective educator. Lots of things that we need to do, and I'm going to be the vocal advocate for educators and education in the state assembly.
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you for asking this question. I think, you know, what we need to do is, you know, we need to dismantle white supremacy, you know, like ending these types of tests that basically, you know, that add barriers and prevent our teachers of color from entering the profession. We need to diversify the pipeline and make sure that we're promoting, you know, people of color to get into the profession. This is a profession that is losing a lot of interest, and when we have hurdles like this, it raises a red flag. And I'm glad, Precious, that you brought this question up, because, you know, we need to make sure that we're promoting our sisters and brothers in the community, and that we end this racist, you know, this racist standardized testing. You know, here in San Leandro, what we did, you know, is we closed the equity gap, and we pay for students to take these types of tests. But, you know, we all know that these are racist tests, the SATs, the ACTs, but also, you know, with regards to educators and, you know, the resources that have to go behind that for these educators, especially educators of color, to take these exams. You know, we all know what people have to go through when they take the bar exam, and the costs that are associated with that. This is, you know, very much so for our educators. And I think this is something that you know, I would push for in legislation, to make sure that we that we get rid of this, that we, you know, get credentials and get our educators credentials, and that we also offer, you know, pay has to do with this as well, to make sure that we're paying our teachers accordingly, that they're getting a living wage. You know, all of our children deserve access to quality, engaging, and culturally competent education. And this means that, you know, the diversity of the educators, and not just one race that is, you know, focused on teaching.
Thank you. Mia?
One of the strongest predictors of a child being able to succeed in and graduate with the ability to go on to post-secondary opportunities is that they have a strong Black and BIPOC teacher in front of them who has the cultural experience, the connectedness, and the ability to be able to represent who they are. It is tried and true that when we're able to put educators who are able to connect with our students, that the impact of that is that those educators are able to ensure that our students are able to succeed. They're inextricably linked. So yes, we have a situation now where we do have a white supremacist kind of framework dictating the kinds of credentialing programs that are available for our teachers and educators. And I would absolutely put forward and work with our labor partners in particular, like CTA, who have already put forward a very strong framework for thinking about the ways not only to support credentialing programs, but evaluation, assessment, and performance management programs as well into the state legislature as a key thing that we need to do. We absolutely need to be able to do things like put into place programs like teacher residency programs that allow for our educators to be able to live in and make an investment in their community and be in their community so that they can teach in our community. And we also need to ensure that we're promoting grow your own programs that allow us to be able to take the talent that we already have in this district and in our districts and ensure that they have a pathway to be able to continuing their professional success. And we also need to make sure that we're offering opportunities for different kinds of emergency credentialing and getting our teachers who have the experience further on down the road, and also connecting that to administrative programs as well, because we also need incredibly strong administrators to be able to lead us in our work. So I would absolutely be in support of anything that would allow us to be able to remove a framework that does not allow us to be able to support our students and doesn't allow our Black and Brown educators to be fully professional and professionalized in our school system.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our candidates for the rich discussion and your thoughtful answers. That brings us to the end of this part of our time together. Before I pass it back to Walter Riley, I would be remiss if I didn't just uplift and recognize and really thank two Sisters of the Holy Names who've joined us today, Sister Barbara Bray and Sister Joanne Quinlivan. Thank you so much. And our colleague Zaida McCall Perez in the School of Ed has joined us today, as well as two Oakland Unified School District members, representatives, Mike Hutchinson and Vin Cedric Williams. So thank you so much for being with us today.
And former Oakland City Council member Wilson Riles.
Oh, and thank you, City Council member Wilson Riles. Thank you so much. And now I will pass this to Walter Riley. And Walter, I'm going to send you something in the chat that only you can see.
Okay.
And it brings us to the end moments of our program today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you to everyone. We are now open to questions from other people that are on this Zoom call. In preparation for that, I want to give you some things to think about and maybe some 2 minutes to respond. Maybe some of you didn't have a chance to completely answer a couple of questions. And if you did not, you can do that right now. One of the things that is obvious, we are here with a number of educators. We're here with Paul Cobb and Gay Cobb, the publishers of the Oakland Post. So everything that you're saying here will be considered and maybe reach out to a larger audience. And there will be comments perhaps by other folks. One thing I notice is that we sort of tend to agree from other forums around a number of issues around FIGMAT, around the loan, around education, around the issues of how bad it is that we are living in a society where the police are racist and that we live in an economic system that helps to maintain the divisions basically in BIPOC communities. There's sort of general agreement, but on the specific issue today around Howard Terminal, there was not clarity from everyone, and no one sought to find clarity from your opponents. Running in a race such as this in this district with the number of people running, it would be useful to the public for candidates to exercise this platform and their platforms to try and clarify the issues. In this case, is it possible for any of you to try and clarify some of the issues that maybe you have differences on? If you're all in agreement, maybe you should run as a caucus for the assembly. Otherwise, it's useful, particularly in Oakland, for people to clarify their differences between themselves and some of the others. And that's helpful to the public. It's helpful to all of us to be better educated and better informed about the choices that we have to make. I'm open for some comments now for people, 2 minutes each. And I'm going to start looking at my screen with James, Mia, Joel, Victor, Malia, and Johnny. Yes, James.
Sure. Sorry, I was waiting. Well, first and foremost, thank you for this space. I mean, the excellent questions, and it's been excellent dialogue. Specifically, as you brought up, Walter, with the Howard Terminal, just full stop, I'm opposed to the Howard Terminal project. I know from family experience, having lived in Oakland, you know, what exactly it would do to our community. I'm not happy about it, and it comes at a very high cost to the taxpayers of Oakland. So for sure, you know, full stop opposed. Clarifying some things, of course, I'm running to uplift education as the top priority because California has absolutely ignored the focus on education in the state. And we need to really advocate for full and fair funding of California public education, or else we're not going to be able to address the issues of the 21st century, the issues that we're all talking about. It all starts with education. So I think that's why I'm here. But, you know, I'm also here to empowered by experiences of my family, my mom experiencing health issues, living under a predatory landlord who didn't care about that, or that we were low income, empowered by my experience just working with students and listening to their stories and really being able to better understand the issues of our communities. So that's why I'm here, and I'm really empowered to do that for not only the city of Oakland, but city of Alameda, where I have also had family come from, and San Leandro, beautiful city in which I call home.
Mia.
I think you're right to share that there is a lot of similarity in policy. One thing that I would ask the voters to consider as they're making their selection is the opportunity for being able to have the kind of experiences in terms of our life experiences, but also our professional experiences and how we approach legislation and the kind of work that we've done. You asked a really pointed question about how we could all be hitting the ground running and what we have actually done before. I think I've heard and have been able to speak to the fact that I have been working in community in Oakland, in Alameda, and working on behalf of school districts across the country, and true to be able to ensure that we have a strong pipeline of support for our educators, that we have opportunities for our students to be able to succeed and for our families to be able to exist. I also come from an experience of knowing what it's like to want. I moved 13 times in 16 years. I woke up with sometimes empty refrigerators, and I've been subjected to predatory landlords and know what that experience is like. I've been able to translate that into the work that I do every single day for our children, our youth, and our families, and know that we have so much that we need to be able to change. I'm seeking to be able to bring that experience to the California State Legislature, and I also have the benefit of having many in the California State Legislature who know that I have the ability to join them in the work that they do and represent our community. Yes, we have all progressive values and an approach to our work. my approach is to roll up our sleeves, to be able to get in and make sure that we're impacting in true our communities in the kind of legislation that we pass, and do that in concert and in collaboration with our community stakeholders, our people who are most impacted by anything that we do. And that's what you'll find and you'll get if with a vote for me for California State Assembly.
Joel. You're muted, Joel. Joel, you are muted.
Oh, okay. Is that it? Am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay. This issue between the where this billionaire should have his stadium, and you know how much the people of Oakland and surrounding area are going to have to pay for it is like I said earlier, I'm not for a penny of public money and resources to subsidize anything around this or anything to do with professional sports. And the key thing is we need to organize solidarity with the struggles that are going on that I referred to, the strikes and situations where workers are locked out. We need to form our own party so we have a voice in politics. We don't really, working people as a conscious class of people don't really have a voice in politics. Being involved in one of the two major big business parties does not give us a voice. And this all goes toward ending the dog eat dog situation that we're in of living in this capitalist society, which is still not out of America's longest war ever, and we need to fight for our interests. As it's not an education crisis; it's a social crisis of the system that we're facing, and many aspects of it have been referred to today. The tremendous problems of people finding a place to live, and the homicide rates, and all of these things are a reflection of that.
Thank you. I'm going to exercise change in the order and call on Janani now. She indicates she has to leave, and then Victor.
Firstly, I want to clarify and reiterate my earlier statement that I was the very first candidate in this race who took an uncompromising and clear public stance against the Howard Terminal project back at a time where it was actually unpopular to do so. I faced a lot of criticism in the beginning because this was at a time we didn't know, the public was not aware that this project would cost over $1 billion. But I did it anyway, and the reason why I did it was that I saw injustices. I heard from West Oakland community groups, I heard from longshoremen, and I heard from members of the public whose lives would have been interrupted by this project. And I took the stance because of the voices of community members and workers that I heard. And I chose to oppose it because of that and for absolutely no other reason. And I haven't wavered since. And that's indicative of the kind of policymaker that I'm going to be. I'm going to be an independent thinker that listens to the voices of community members, that hears injustices and takes action in response. You'll never hear excuse out of my mouth when I'm a legislator that something is too hard to do, that there are too many special interests at stake, or that there's too much money at play. I'm going to be someone that fights uncompromisingly on any issue that I hear injustices on, whether it's right here in Oakland at the Port of Oakland, whether it's injustices in Palestine, whether it's anything anywhere that affects our people right here. And I'm bringing the lenses of my experiences based on my own personal background and stories of struggle and resilience, and those of the community members that I I've worked with right here in Oakland, tenants who have been evicted and even in the middle of a pandemic. I've worked with our elderly tenants right here in East Oakland. I've worked with survivors of domestic violence. I've worked with individuals experiencing mental health crisis, and there's never a day that goes by that I don't remember these individuals' stories of struggle and pain. And this is what's going to drive me. This is why I'm choosing to run for this seat.
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you for asking that question. I think, as somebody who has lived life experiences and is not an elitist, did not come for money, is somebody, who has been beaten up for being, who I am, a gay man. I'm running for the assembly because I believe that every Californian deserves universal health care, affordable housing, and justice. That's not just a slogan. We also need to focus on, what is right, what is meaningful, especially to those folks in Oakland. And that is the Howard Terminal. That is something that is plagued and riddled with loopholes and is just not good for the city of Oakland. This is something that we need to focus on. I mean, there's quagmires with traffic and the $500 million in infrastructure costs and the CO2 emissions. This is something that, yes, we need to improve infrastructure, but not at the cost of the community and bringing this stadium to this part of the port, which would limit folks from getting the food that they need and accessing the port, our truckers, and raising costs. This is I'm someone who was raised in a union household by parents whose families immigrated from Mexico. My parents taught me how to respond to hard times with a love for family, community, and a passion for social justice. As San Leandro's first openly gay vice mayor and first openly gay school board member, one of the two, I have a passion for social justice. I've championed progressive policies that make a long-lasting difference in people's lives, and that's something that I'm going to champion to do in Sacramento, from hazard pay for grocery workers to rent stabilization and civilian police oversight. I will champion affordable housing. I will be a voice for racial, economic, and environmental justice. Go to Victor for California to learn more. Your vote has the power to make change. Vote for victory. Vote for Victor. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. I do have one other follow-up question, and I'm frankly, personally disappointed that the other candidates did not clarify the issue on the Howard terminal. Mia Bonta, you have indicated in the past that you support the Howard terminal, I believe. And I don't think it was clear today what your position is, and nobody has been able to define that.
Thank you. I just posted a comment in the chat for people. I have indicated that I've had the opportunity at this point to meet with the East Oakland Stadium Alliance, and it was very helpful to hear the perspective there. I also think that there's an opportunity to be able to have the Howard Terminal, and that there are a lot of things that we project and the Oakland A Stadium put there. And I think that there are a lot of things unknowns right now that need further exploration. And I'm fully in favor and wanting to ensure that we have the opportunity to have a full exploration of what that project would look like. And I'm not in favor at all of steamrolling the public or steamrolling any kind of opportunity for West Oakland neighbors for the CEQA process to be advanced without consideration, full consideration. And I think we need to be able to take our time in Oakland to ensure that if we move forward with that project, that we are fully represented in our review of that project.
Thank you. I believe you're the former assembly person. Your husband was a sponsor of the support for the Howard Terminal, and you no doubt have some information regarding that. What response do you have to those of us who wonder why you're not clear on it right now? Because it's been something in your household for a while, the issue.
Sir, I'm my own person and have my own pathway to be able to determine how I intend to legislate and how I intend to engage and continue to engage our community. And that will be my approach as our next state legislator. Thanks so much for creating the space. I have to go on to another forum at this time.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And I don't have any other questions on the agenda. Thank you, everybody. The organizers can stay on for a minute.
Thank you for the opportunity, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Space. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, everyone.